Queen. I'm Yasmin.
I'm Ahmed.
And we are back in the US of A.
Back in the United States.
Back
Number
in
one
the
country
USA.
in the world.
I don't know about that.
All that stuff we said about Sisi, just false.
Well, we don't have to worry about that now that we're out of Egypt. We can criticize Sisi.
No, I know. That's before this. We were singing his praises.
Yeah, some of us more
Especially
convincingly
you.
than others.
Especially you.
We're glad to be back. We're still adjusting to the time difference and kind of getting back into a rhythm, but it feels good.
I've been up since 3 a.m.
Yeah, this guy was like, we gotta stay up till 9, and then 8 p.m.
fell
Cutie
asleep
pie
at 8.
fell asleep.
Man.
I fell asleep at 11, but I have a hard time sleeping on a good day, so it worked in my favor.
Yeah.
I woke up at 6:30? So yeah, I'm getting there.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were so tired. It was adorable.
I was so tired. It came out of nowhere too. I thought I was gonna make it until 9 o'clock easy.
I offered to talk to you for an hour.
I didn't want to talk.
I could do that easily.
I just wanted to sleep.
I could have talked at you like a little podcast.
Oh, yeah.
One of my favorite things to do when I'm having a hard time falling asleep is just to like talk about stuff out loud. It's really calming.
Yeah, you do that a lot.
Yeah.
You just make a list.
Yeah. Plan future trips.
Uh-huh.
It's nice.
It is nice.
Yeah. But we had a good trip overall. I think we did a pretty thorough review last podcast.
We hadn't gone to Alexandria last time, right?
Yeah, we hadn't.
Highlights there were the seafood.
Seafood
and that's
was
about
incredible. Yeah. So the food was amazing. Aside from, it was also really just cool because, you know, it's where you grew up as a kid. So it was nostalgic and sweet to like walk around the neighborhood that was your childhood neighborhood.
Yeah.
Aside from that, pretty skippable city, I have to say.
Yeah. I'm going to claim Cairo now because I was actually born in Cairo.
But your family is from Alexandria.
Right.
You just were born in a hospital in Cairo.
Right.
Because your mom had complications, right? Yeah.
I don't know if it was that specifically. I think they just wanted to go to a nice hospital.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
You know, honestly, after seeing Alexandria, no, it's fine. It's a cute enough city. It just like was not as happening as Cairo.
It should be much better.
Yeah. The main kind of attraction, as far as I can tell, is that it's on the ocean, which like I'm a huge beach person. Like I would love that.
Like the Pittsburgh of Egypt.
Pittsburgh is nicer.
It's the Pittsburgh of Egypt.
Maybe. But yeah, I mean, like Pittsburgh, they built all these highways like right on the water, so you can't easily access the beaches, and they're dirty. They're pretty polluted. So yeah, but the seafood was literally like some of the best seafood I've ever had. So that was awesome.
It's great.
Yeah.
And cheap.
Yeah, we bought a bunch of stuff. We've been putting it around the house, which is fun post-trip thing to do.
Yeah. What else did we do? Our last day.
Our last day was packed.
God, I mean, we did a lot, but the airport was just a nightmare.
Oh my God, I can't even.
The way they designed it is kind of the worst possible design for an airport. You go through
like
security.
Someone who wanted to do torture, low-key.
Yeah. You go through security first, and then we got stuck in a no man's land between security and then the next place, which is the passport control, for which you have to have your boarding passes.
So just to be clear, what we didn't realize, because like, you know, you get to the airport, you kind of hang out, and normally you either hang out in this first area or you go through security and then you hang out by the gates. Right. But what they did is they made us scan not just our carry-on luggage, but the baggage that we were going to check. So we didn't even have like our boarding pass yet. And no one explained to us that once we did that, we couldn't come back. Right. But then once we got through like this initial scan and we're like, all right, let's get our boarding pass. And there's like another whole security thing. We couldn't do that because no one at Turkish Airlines was there yet. Right. And so we got to the airport 6 hours early, which is way too early. But to our, like in our defense. But you're thinking like,
I'll get there early. Sure, I'll hang out just by the gates or something.
Yeah, and like our flight was at 4:30 a.m. So it's just like awkward timing. We were exhausted. We were paying for a driver by the hour to keep all of our luggage. And
we were hoping we'd be able to go in and like hang out in one of the lounges.
Yeah, totally. You know? Just pay a little bit, hang out for a few hours. Yeah. But yeah, so we got there, I think 6 hours early, and I think we got to our gate like 20 minutes before boarding because that's how long all the security took.
Yeah. So you go into this, they created this like little
purgatory.
Yeah, it's like a purgatory where you just experience ego death.
There was no water there, which is also so ridiculous.
No food. And then we stood in line for most of the time. It did feel like the day of judgment was coming upon us.
Yeah, it was rough. But I mean, if the roughest part of our trip was the airport, then all in all, I think it was a smoother trip than we would have anticipated.
For sure.
Yeah. I think that actually was like the worst part of the trip was the airport.
The airport? Yeah. You think so? It was definitely worse than the train station.
For sure.
It was worse than,
The train station, we could get a little coffee and some water.
Yeah.
You know, sit, walk around.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Leaving the going for like an arriving flight.
Yeah.
Was
and then in Istanbul, when we transferred, they put us through a ridiculous amount of security. But at that point, we were like, hey, at least this is efficient. At least it's going fast. You know, whatever. If you want to look through our bags 4 times, go for it.
We were on a plane with several men who had just gotten fresh hair transplants in Istanbul.
Ahmed has done so much research that he can literally tell like what kind they had.
Yeah, it's going to be me one day, brothers. I will join you. I'll be that guy.
I don't think you need to now, but maybe one day if you really want. It seems pricey though, but
definitely will be doing it one day.
Really?
For sure.
All right, we got a budget for that.
And then
how long do you have to be there like when you get that done?
I think it depends. Like you can do it like you don't really need to be there long.
Really? It's not like you have to go repeatedly to the office or anything?
No, it's outpatient sort of thing.
Nice.
Like they're not, but I'm not sure. I think most people just book like a week-long trip or something.
That's not bad.
Yeah. But after you do it, like you just can't really do much. Like you can't be out in the sun. You can't like be in the water. You know, you probably don't want to be walking around a ton and like sweating.
Oh, so it's not great for like touring.
No.
Unless, I mean, I guess it depends on when you go.
You do it on your way out maybe. Or
you go like in the winter.
Or you go in the winter.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah. Then we saw some young ladies who had just gotten some nose jobs.
Yeah.
And we hate to assume, but they were probably Persian.
I mean, we just know that that's
they
like
just kind of look very Persian.
They look Persian, and we also know that that's like common in a lot of Persian American communities. Yeah. Not to say all, but yeah.
But it looked like their father had taken them to get
they were
jobs,
pretty young.
Which is kind of weird.
I mean, it's tricky. I don't want to pass judgment because I think that look, you're thinking about getting hair plants. Like bodily modification is complicated, but
yeah, but I'm a man.
You're right. That changes
also,
it.
there is a
I mean, I hear you.
Right?
It is. I mean, they're really young too. They look like they were like maybe like, I don't know, 17, 18. Yeah. I don't know. Pretty young.
I guess it depends on the quality. I don't know. That's the thing that kind of sucks. It is weird. Yeah, I guess I'm in no position to pass judgment, but there are like people who get transplants that are kind of like unnatural. You know what I'm saying? They give themselves like a weird like Wolverine hairline where it's just like really straight across.
And the thing that's hard about like noses is like, I think, often people are getting them to conform more to European beauty standards, and it's tricky. Yeah.
Anyway, that's about it overall. I mean, I guess what's your takeaway from Egypt?
Glad we did Alexandria. Wouldn't go again unless we like had a specific meetup with family, in which case I would, because unfortunately a lot of your family was out of town for a wedding, which we didn't know ahead of time. Mm-hmm. So I would go back to meet them, but otherwise I wouldn't really go back. Yeah. Absolutely loved Cairo. Like such a rich city. We were there and looked around quite a bit for like a full 5 days probably. Mm-hmm. And we could easily fill another itinerary with a week with things that we didn't do. So that's like a really fun thing. I love a city like that.
Yeah.
I could really see us being there for a month or two if we ever have a pocket of time. It was a really fun trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a great time, honestly. It was way smoother than I anticipated. Really good reminder just for life to kind of set expectations low and be happily surprised.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure.
But yeah, no, people were really warm and we had a lot of really lovely interactions. Of course, like anything, it's always a mixed bag in any kind of different country. Like, some things are working really well, some things are hard to see. But overall, had a really smooth experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you? Do you feel more Egyptian?
No, opposite, actually.
Really?
Yeah. I think that's kind of the thing you think about is you're like, ostensibly, I have some connection to this place. I speak the language. I think before going, part of me was like, oh yeah, maybe I will feel more Egyptian after or whatever. But the whole time I was there, it was just like, yeah, we had a great time. I really loved meeting a lot of, people and, talking to people and being able to use like Arabic more than I was using English for a little while. But the whole time I was like, man, this place would destroy me if I lived. Like, just living there is so it's hard. Like, that's like another level of toughness that I just can't.
It's all what you're used to, though.
Comprehend.
I mean, you can think about how like,
but I'm not used to
it. Of course,
that's the thing. Is it's the people there, just like the tenacity to just like move through that city day in, day out is insane. it's an exhausting place, but it's also like really lovely. It has a lot of really great things going for it, despite obviously the political and economic situation. But I was just like, yeah, no, I'm definitely like a foreigner here, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
well, of course you are. You left when you were like 5.
Yeah.
That's interesting though. Yeah. We've been really enjoying ice since we've been back. So many stereotypical
That's
American
true. We've been
things.
having coffee, ice.
Your strong ass coffee is so nice to have again.
Yeah.
I feel more awake than I have for days.
Aside
else?
from Cairo, we just couldn't really get like a pour over.
Yeah.
Cairo is really the only place that's doing that. Everywhere else is doing like a really bad Americano.
Or it seems like people tend to more get like lattes or yeah. You found like a cute little hipster coffee shop you liked in Cairo though.
A couple. I mean, we were in Zamalek and there are a lot of good cafes that are doing, I guess, quote, more Western style coffees.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's nice to be back with consistent air conditioning. That feels good too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's always fun to come home with kind of fresh eyes, and also like thinking about the things that, you know, I think it makes you a little more sympathetic for just a moment to like the things in like your world that would be hard for someone who is new here to navigate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It it was great, but it was a very humbling trip. Yeah.
And we have plans now, inshallah, that we're trying to figure out to maybe go to Sweden. Continuing with our ridiculous...
The northernmost tip of Sweden in the winter.
We're trying to just do extreme weather tours exclusively from now on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have some family. They're not from this area because only...
we got to go to like somewhere like in the coast of India during like monsoon season.
Yeah, exactly. Just get like totally rained out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got a really lovely like distant family member. I think he's my mom's second cousin. But because I grew up in New York City, a really cool thing about that is that like we often saw a lot of people that we wouldn't have because they were traveling through the city, and it's like a big place that people often, you know, have to go for work and stuff. So he had business in New York a few times and stayed with us. And we got to know him, really nice guy. And he actually brought his daughters at one point for a trip, and they're our age. We had a lot of fun with them. And they live in Kiruna, which is the northernmost part of Sweden. It's like right by the North Pole, which is kind of crazy. And like it's right across from Norway, which is it's also where the ice hotel is. If you've heard of that, they build it every winter. It's a hotel entirely made out of ice. So I think it'll be really cool. They
rebuild it every winter?
Because it melts in the summer.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it looks a little different every time, which is kind of cool.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it would cost too much to like keep it going, you know, in the summer.
Sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it'll be so cool. You can see the northern lights.
That's cute. It's like such an elf type thing to do.
To rebuild it every winter.
There's just like a bunch of little guys in
I think
suits.
it's like a point of pride for like the architects and stuff who like get appointed to like help build it and plan it.
Guys?
I don't know.
Or do different people like have their own take on the ice hotel?
That's a great question. I know that it changes a little bit every year, but I don't know. Yeah.
That's so cute.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of like little Swedish Keebler elf guys just rebuilding it every summer.
Yeah, exactly. Well, every winter. Yeah.
Every winter.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that'll be fun.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be really cool. I think we'll only go for hopefully, and we haven't confirmed this yet, I should say.
Yeah.
But we're hopefully going to go for a week and do Kiruna, which I haven't done before, and then Stockholm. So we won't get to see like a lot of Sweden, and I think we definitely would want to go back for a summer trip to like see the places where my family was from years ago and that we still have some connections. Yeah. But I think for a week, just Stockholm and Kiruna would be pretty epic. And it'd be fun for me because it'd be something new also I haven't seen in Sweden.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to go up there and
Northern Lights.
Try to see the Northern Lights. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we got the travel bug. It'll be fun.
Hopefully I'll have a new camera by that point and I'll be able to
capture
take some
them.
cool pictures.
Yeah, it'd be cool.
Because no one's photographed them.
No,
before.
They're famously completely uncaptured.
I think I'll be the first one, so that'll be nice.
Yeah, it's gonna go down.
Yeah.
All right, so we have 2 news items today to talk about. One I'm surprising Ahmed with, but I think it's going to be super interesting. And one, let's start off with the one that's kind of been on the news.
Trans.
Just all trans, yeah.
Good or bad?
No.
Oh, okay. No, this Algerian boxer, Imane Khelif, is that her name?
That's right, yeah.
So, I mean, I think a lot of people have probably heard of it by this point, but, this boxer went up. The clip that's going around is that Imane, who is Algerian, and it seems like born, raised female, although has the mutation or whatever where she just like has more testosterone. And I've heard a couple people say she's actually like intersex.
So she says that's not the case.
That's not the case.
Yeah, she just has slightly elevated levels of testosterone, and we'll get into this, but a lot of women do.
Sure. She's tall, has like a very like, more masculine than most, like, not ideal, but like more,
what we conventionally think of as feminine.
Feminine, ideals or whatever. But she goes up against this Italian boxer.
So they're boxers, like their job is to hit. Yeah.
Their job is to punch
That's people. Like the whole sport.
God, that's the thing. It's like they're expecting.
It's not like they were playing like
little fucking beauty
basketball and she went rogue. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Anyway, so she goes up and then against the Italian fighter, and the Italian fighter like quits 45 seconds into the fight.
Yeah.
Because I guess she takes like one or two hits from Imane.
She knocks her out. Yeah.
No, she doesn't knock her out. But
she's like clearly winning. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think she's just like, I can't beat this lady. Like, there's no way. So I just tapped out early.
And she's crying hysterically.
It seems like the person who really set it off was J.K. Rowling, who was just like, oh, this is like the new feminism where a man beats a woman.
Right.
And like he transitions so that he can compete and fight.
So hilariously, J.K. Rowling, who's a huge TERF, which is like a trans exclusionary reactionary feminist, I think, it's just assumed that this woman was trans, which is kind of so fascinating.
And then everyone like followed her lead, right?
And then pretty quickly there was a backlash. But the woman is not trans, but it kind of brings a couple of interesting things to light. I think one, I think the way that we kind of like this idea of like debating whether or not even trans athletes should be allowed to participate in sports. It kind of just shows that there is like, we think about like, oh, gender is something that is about how you identify, but like sex is biological, but sex also is not like a fixed category. It has some natural variety.
Yes.
And it's more of a spectrum. And the fact is,
That's kind of why. So I feel like what happened was, J.K. Rowling and all those people came out and were like, this man transitioned so that he could hit women.
Yeah.
And then the pushback against that, which I think was, in good faith and trying to be like, like the left woke side or whatever, people were like, actually, she's a woman.
I don't think that was like a leftist response, to be fair. I think that was just kind of like a quick thing.
Like something is missed in being like, this is an area that neither side has been like well equipped to really talk about. Like I get like obviously this woman like identifies as a woman,
right? So that part is important.
So that part,
and like has her entire life,
But yes, tangential to this is like, okay, how should we be thinking about expanding these like athletic arenas and like allowing for like trans athletes or like, like how does the not only gender fluidity but the like sex fluidity, it's not like even that's not as binary as we typically think it to be. And even people who are on the left, more left side of like the gender fluidity discussion, like seem to kind of be falling into like the sex binary thing.
I don't think so, actually. I think there's been a lot of interesting nuanced discourse, at least looking at the people I follow.
Not me.
Oh. But I mean, something
I've been following the end wokeness account. That's kind of where I'm getting my information.
I don't think that's true.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't mean to say that. I think.
No, I'm for real. That's what's been showing up on my Twitter timeline. I've been seeing Elon Musk.
I thought you were being like self-deprecating.
No, Elon Musk and end wokeness.
But Elon Musk is not a leftist or a feminist. But I mean, it's also brought up, and I actually didn't even know the statistic, but apparently like 20% of all people who identify as women who are quote unquote biologically female, which is obviously a complicated and problematic term, have testosterone levels that are elevated beyond like the other 80% of women, either because they have PCOS, which is something I know multiple people who have that condition. And there's just genetic variation. And I think the other thing that's really kind of frustrating that I've seen some really helpful commentary on is like a lot of athletes are built with bodies that are suited to their sport. Like that's why they end up doing it. You know what I mean? Like you've heard so much commentary on Michael Phelps and how he's like the perfect stature and body for like a swimmer. You know what I mean? His like arms are kind of like freakishly long, compared to the general population. And apparently like his fingers even are like a little web. Like his body is built, and of course like he obviously, it's like a nature versus nurture thing. He obviously worked very hard and trained, but like he is built with a body. He was born with a body that lends itself to swimming. And so similarly, if you know, are built or you are born with like slightly elevated levels of testosterone.
You're a tall, lanky like woman with like a long reach.
Totally.
And you're kind of got a somewhat muscular build.
Yeah, you just like are more prone to be good at that. Why not?
Boxer,
right, exactly. Yeah. And then there is also, I think, a racial element to this too, for sure, where it's kind of like ideas of what is the ideal feminine often are kind of like a white European. And there's just kind of the optics of like this woman who is white, like crying over being hit when she's literally in a fucking sport where you're, I mean, again, like that is her sport. She's actually apologized, which maybe is because of like, you know, pressure from donors and stuff, but still at least she was like, I just saw I felt a little bit bad for her. Actually, I was glad that she apologized. She was like, I saw that my Olympic dream was being dashed and I was upset. And like, if the committee has decided that this person is able to, you know, able to perform, then that's like fair enough, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know like apparently Serena Williams has been tested like more than like any other athlete in her sport. Often like women of color are kind of, there's more like, are you actually a woman?
Do you remember when we were younger? And I feel like Venus and Serena, like there were all these pictures coming out of them like when they were like celebrating or whatever. And people were trying to like frame them as like really masculine.
Yeah.
Like, are these really, you know?
Yeah, there's definitely something weird there.
It definitely happens with black women athletes a lot. And even with like Michelle Obama, like people, like,
absolutely.
There's like a lot of like right-wing conspiracy people who are like, Michelle Obama's actually a man.
Right.
And Obama's like a gay prostitute sort of thing.
What?
Like, I don't know.
Yeah, where are you on the internet?
Listen.
No, but you're totally
QAnon.
Oh God. No,
Check
but you're totally right. I think there's this idea of like white femininity. Yeah, it's something that's both racialized and about sex and gender, which is interesting. All those things are kind of intersecting.
No one's doing that with Caitlin Clark.
No, exactly.
Who is someone who is pretty aggressive on the court.
Mm-hmm.
She's tall.
Yep.
But like
setting records in her sport.
People are like, oh yeah, she's just like a, you know, a spunky white girl.
Yeah.
You know, sort of thing. Like, so there is definitely a big difference between how people here are talking about Caitlin Clark versus whatever, but versus Imane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like, I mean, as is fair, like Algeria has been very defensive and is very proud of her. So that's
the
good.
other part that I've seen of this is some people being like, do you really believe Algeria would allow a trans athlete
oh, interesting.
to take part in the
I mean,
Olympics?
honestly, probably not, but also that's like not really the point.
And then other people have been like posting old pictures of a man and being like, where's her hijab if she's not a man?
What?
Yeah, they're posting pictures of her, like, I don't know, from like, you know, just being out or whatever.
Like, just assuming that everyone in Algeria wears hijab? Is that
exactly? Oh. Yeah. They were like, if she was a woman, she would have a hijab on.
Oy. So it's kind of like, oh, probably those same people think hijab is bad, but also that all Muslim women should wear them, or do you wear them? Yeah, it's confusing.
Like, people are just getting really confused.
Yeah. I've seen pictures of her circulating as like a little girl, but it's also kind of weird to me. I mean, I at the same time, like maybe I don't know her, but maybe that's like important to her and like to be like, I've always identified as a woman. But like you were saying, it's kind of like, so what? It's like a picture of her in a pink dress and she's got earrings on and she's like 6. And it's like, all right, cool. I guess, yeah, she looks like she was socialized as a girl and she identified as a girl. But like, I also don't need to see proof of that for her to be an athlete. I don't know. Yeah.
My solution to this is very clear.
Yeah.
It's simple. And you know it, right?
Oh, you just think everyone should compete the same, right? Like
there should not be gender segregated sports. Like I think if sports is like the arena of like meritocracy, right? Like that's the reason we enjoy it.
But it's not really, obviously. It's all about who you have access to train, you know. I mean, most of the athletes who are like winning golds have actually trained in the US. You know what I mean? Even if they're not representing the US. Yeah,
but I mean, if you just get rid of the gender segregation and you make it like, then, you know, here in the US, I guess taking basketball, for example, and who knows, right? Like I'd be interested in hearing other people's opinions, but boys are very like much conditioned if someone sees that they may have the, you know, genetic kind of foundation to be able to be like a really great athlete from a young age. they're like primed to go to these like basketball academies. They get training early. They play at a much more competitive level much earlier in their lives, and so obviously you like build like a really top-notch athlete
earlier than girls, you mean?
I think here they take it more seriously than girls, right? Like the infrastructure to build athletes
starts
at
younger.
that level is more built for boys than it is for girls. Again, let me know if I'm wrong on this, but that's just kind of what I've observed. And I just feel like why not just like also let girls have access to those same things, right? Like I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like again, if the whole thing is supposed to be merit based, then why not just like include everyone and see who rises to the top?
It's so complicated. I honestly don't know enough to have a strong opinion. I think it should definitely. I mean, I guess one thing I do feel is that you should be able to compete in the category that conforms with your gender identification. I think that makes sense.
But this whole thing is not about gender, right?
No, I know. But then I guess the thing that is complicated is I'm guessing for some sports, like there are biological differences between, again, there's always outliers and it's not a clear cut thing, but between many men and many women. And so I don't know. Does it make sense?
Between like male, female. Is that what you're talking about?
That's what I mean. Sorry. Yeah.
So I think
like, you know,
then,
in terms of like the way bodies are built and stuff, I don't know.
I know Imane is not obviously intersex, but then like what do you do with intersex
if someone
athletes?
is intersex?
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
And this is probably like such a small percentage. And
but
like,
you know, it's actually less small than I thought. We were reading about this recently. There are as many people who are intersex, or born intersex at least, as there are redheads.
But if you're talking about,
isn't that crazy though?
We're already talking about like people who become like hyper competitive athletes, which is a small
yeah.
And then you're talking about even much.
No, I know it's not a massive group of people, but I think it is interesting that it is probably more people than like at least I was socialized to realize.
Yeah.
But I think two things happen. One, this is so complicated, but I actually fell on a YouTube thing at one point of like people who were born intersex who grow up and feel really upset that their parents made the decision for them, like to genitally alter their body when they were babies and pick one thing. So like because we live in a society that is so binary, I think a lot of people just get kind of pushed into one category.
Yeah.
And so there are less people than we would realize. And then also it's just like a lot of gender is performance. And so you don't necessarily know someone's biological sex that they were born with just by looking at them.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are more people than we probably realize. Yeah. But you're right. It's still a subsection of subsect. Yeah.
I just say like just get rid of the gender segregation.
Or sex maybe. I really don't know.
Sports and then see what happens. Like, my guess is probably you would have still a lot more, like in the NBA, you'd have more male athletes who have like a body type like LeBron James make it to the top than you would have like Caitlin Clark.
But then, but it's kind of that's the thing. What if you enjoy watching women's sports? I mean, I don't know.
But
like it's still competitive and interesting to watch women compete against other women, even if like the average woman's body is not built for basketball in the same way that like.
But then are you going to create a league for like every type of sex identification?
But this is the thing. People make such a big deal out of this and it's such a kind of flashpoint in the culture wars, but there aren't that many trans athletes. There aren't that many intersex athletes. Like I feel like just let those folks identify as they want to.
Yeah.
And like it's not a real thing. The way that I think conservatives think it is that like someone is transitioning just so that they can become a boxer. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely
so it's kind of like whatever. Like if one person happened to be born one way and then undergoes like sex reassignment surgery, I don't know. Sorry if these are not the proper terms. Then like, who cares? You know, I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, they care.
They do.
But the funny thing is that they like, also like the right is rigidly like, oh, we are the people who think that like the bootstraps ideology and you only get what you work for
right
sort of thing, and like life should be a meritocracy. Ayn Rand, Fountainhead, whatever. Atlas Shrugged.
Wow, keep going. Okay.
You know what I'm saying? It's just like, but then here they are trying to like totally contradicting that by being like, oh, this poor little Italian boxer didn't even get a fair shot.
Right. As opposed to like this other woman like clearly worked for it and like, you know.
Or she's just better.
And
right?
just is better,
even if she's just didn't even train for boxing, but she's just like hulking over every other woman because she has this genetic advantage.
Yeah.
sorry.
Right.
That's nature,
and again,
buddy.
like at the Olympics, surely every athlete there had some kind of genetic advantage. Like, you could be really talented at basketball, but not be 6 foot, and you're just never going to be at the Olympics. That's life. Like, yeah. Oh, it's interesting. I don't know. The whole thing is strange.
That's, those are my thoughts. Did you see there was this one swimmer, I forgot, from one country who had never really swam in an Olympic pool.
Really? Because like they came from a country without many.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So they were kind of like trying to train in like a small little pool, and they like did really poorly. I didn't watch the whole story, but anyway, yeah. Aww. That was just an aside. What were you gonna say about this last point?
What was I gonna say? Oh, that apparently Imane is guaranteed a final at this point with where she is in the bracket. So that's exciting. Like she's guaranteed a medal. Like she'll either get bronze, silver, or gold.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, be cool to see how she does.
That will be cool.
Yeah.
It'd be awesome if she went up against like a French boxer.
Yeah.
Is France still in?
I don't know.
I've not been watching the Olympics.
Me
at
either.
all.
We've been kind of out of it.
Just don't give a shit.
I enjoy watching swimming. I enjoy some stuff. I watch like watching diving.
What I've been seeing is clips where Israeli athletes are just getting dominated.
Yeah.
But in different. So I don't know if Israel's actually like in the overall medal count, if they're doing well or poorly.
I don't know either.
But
yeah.
I've seen like
the
judo,
Olympics.
some other things, and yeah.
If I don't normally follow it closely, but if we weren't traveling and stuff, I probably would have watched a little more. Actually, my favorite thing to watch though is ice skating in the Winter Olympics. I love watching ice skating.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially like ice dancing is cool.
You're more of a don't really like watching any of them.
Yeah, you watch like basketball.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Should we move on to our second news item?
Yes.
I will hand it over to you.
Okay, what is this? The article is titled "A Battle Over a Farm, a Mosque, and the Moral High Ground."
Yes. So this came out today. It's a New York Times article. The byline is, a proposed Muslim-friendly community near Minneapolis was called segregationist. The backlash was called Islamophobic. Who gets to define inclusion?
That's the subtitle.
The subtitle. My bad.
Byline
not
is
the byline.
Dan Barry. Photographs by Jen Ackerman.
Okay, Mr. Former newspaper editor. Thank you. You were what? The opinions editor of your college newspaper?
Yeah.
That is such a perfect job for you. That's so cute.
Uh-huh.
All right. So yeah, I read this morning and immediately was like, oh, I really want to like walk Ahmed through this article and like get your thoughts. So I think I'll just kind of read sections. We can kind of respond as we go.
Yeah.
So it starts off, Butch Robinson is done. After dedicating most of his 77 years to growing sod, he just wants to sell his sprawl of green and ease his aching back into the lounge chair of a hard-earned retirement. So basically this guy ran like a sod farm. It's been in his family for a while and it's no longer profitable. He wants to get rid of it. And he was approached by a developer. The builder's ambitious plan called for a housing development for 434 homes. It would include shops, restaurants, tennis courts, soccer fields, a park with a pavilion, and a 40,000 square foot mosque.
Ooh. Oh my God.
What are your initial thoughts?
Flag.
Red flag.
40,000 square feet. That's huge.
I can't even really comprehend how big that is. Our apartment right now is 1,700 square feet.
So, okay, think about one of those furniture factories in Thomasville. The big ones. Those are 60,000 square feet.
Oh, wow. That is big.
It's pretty large.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, your immediate thought was red flag?
Well, no, I mean, what it reminded me of was that, I don't think you've seen it, but the last show that Sacha Baron Cohen did called Who is America?
No.
Where he kind of does this, one of the pranks that they do is they go to somewhere in Arizona or something and they try to pitch a new development and it's like a huge mosque.
Oh gosh.
And they see how people react.
And they're like, wow, that's actually literally this. That's really funny.
Yeah.
Did they react badly?
I'll show you after this. I mean, yeah, they weren't happy about it.
All right. So you can kind of turn to the third page here. Basically just kind of says more about this guy's backstory, how he's really excited to get rid of his sod farm. Kind of talks about how a lot of folks, traditionally over the years have left the city for the suburbs. And that there is now kind of a Muslim community that's interested in do that. So the guy who wants to develop this is called Faraz Yusuf. Article mentions that Minnesota has a lot of vibrant Muslim communities, many of them refugees from Ethiopia, Sudan, Somalia. And then we learn a little bit about this developer guy. So Mr. Yusuf moved to Minneapolis, St. Paul from Chicago with his Indian immigrant parents when he was a toddler, attended local public schools, and graduated from the University of Minnesota. Recently married, he and his wife, Sarah, live in Blaine, a city with a growing Muslim community that borders Lino Lakes, which is this sod farm. So he established a company, Zakar Holdings, with a man named Jamil Ahmed, self-described online as a recognized leader in the Islamic financing, mortgage, and real estate industry. I really like that kind of dig at self-described, but that's fair. So they're looking for a development. The first thing that this kind of made me think of a little bit is that I actually have studied a number of Muslim groups that were interested in kind of creating sort of autonomous kind of communities that were like self-supporting. And some of them did. So for example, like this group that I look at called the Moorish Science Temple of America had like a farm that people lived on, and they had a number of like self-supporting businesses in the region. I don't study the Nation of Islam, but they also had like some farm property. It's something that comes up repeatedly in kind of American history. I know also in North Carolina, there was an initial project for
Soul City.
Right. Which was going to be a Black community that was like its own kind of economic zone, right? And like self-supporting. And that was thwarted by white developers, right? Or by white community members.
By senators, community members, politicians. Yeah, they made sure to build, they didn't really let them hook up to the water systems.
Oh wow!
So they built a prison right next to the initial development. They
built a prison?
Yeah. Don't you remember when I took you?
We never went.
Yeah, we did. We drove.
No,
by.
We didn't. Oh my god!
Dude,
okay, quick sidebar. Ahmed is on a tear.
we didn't drive by it.
No.
Okay, well,
that was on our list of things in North Carolina we really wanted to do that we never got to.
Oh no.
So, oh my god. Okay, Ahmed, like this has happened a couple times the last few days. It's actually very cute. For some reason, I used to feel insecure about this, but now I think it's very sweet. He just kind of puts me in his older memories before we were dating.
Yeah.
But he was in a relationship for 7 years, so a lot of it was like with his ex. But it's cute. He was really convinced that we went to two zoos, the DC Zoo and the North Carolina Zoo, neither of which we had been to together. I've never been to the DC Zoo. I went to the North Carolina Zoo once with friends. But it was really cute because you had such specific memories. You're like, remember when you wanted to see the polar bears and they weren't there, so you went to the bathroom.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I haven't seen Soul City, but you told me about it, and I read you introduced me to a podcast that was really interesting, and it's been a while, but I remember reading about it a little bit. Yeah. Because the community is still there, but it's kind of like a sad abandoned place. Well, not the community, I guess. Like there's still infrastructure there.
Yeah, it was weird too because a lot of segregationists kind of did work for the idea, but then at other turns in the process, wanted to make sure that it was kind of like ghettoized a little bit.
This is the thing that's so interesting. What's that?
That's a car.
Oh.
Did you hear that guy revving his engine at like 3 a.m?
Yeah, I did.
Dude, that's so annoying.
Isn't it funny how like one traffic noise is like more disruptive than the constant hum of traffic in Egypt, because then it kind of just forms a backdrop.
Yeah. Well, no one in Egypt also, like, no one modifies their engines like this.
It is
like,
loud as hell with all the honking though, but yeah. That's the thing, is that there is like a history in the US obviously of a lot of segregation through redlining, through official policies, but then when people of color try and do it, it does seem to become more of an issue. Like try to create like autonomous communities as instead of like de facto segregated ones, by like, you know, like white flight in like the 70s to the suburbs created essentially segregated communities. But when it is kind of like something that like usually in this country, Black people, but in this case also other people of color are trying to do, it's often met with resistance, which is kind of interesting.
Well, and even like I think post like de jure segregation, like people still segregated with some like restrictive covenants, and then like I'm glad more people are starting to talk about it now, but for like years since I became like interested in urban planning and stuff, I was just like, why do people allow, like, how are HOAs legal? Because they are just an outgrowth of like the racial restrictive covenants that used to exist, and most HOAs now are like kind of tailored so that they dance around like, this is exactly who we want in our communities.
I didn't really know that until you told me, honestly.
Usually like a, you know, something that matches the class, overall like socioeconomic class of that, but like white.
Yeah,
you have
that's like the subtext.
That is the subtext, and it's just like they enforce the rules and they make your life hell if you like deviate from the kind of white upper middle class norm that the HOAs are typically in.
I know you've had some issues with your HOAs in the past
Fucking
when you were renting.
HOAs so much.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right though. It's interesting. So okay, we'll keep on hearing about the project. They were going to name it Medina Lakes. So going for it with naming it after
Medina Lakes.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Medina. As the article notes, to evoke an Islamic pilgrimage site in Saudi Arabia. It's actually more resonant than that even. Like the very first Muslim community and the Muslim calendar starts with the year 622, which is when the early Muslims who were following the Prophet in Mecca immigrated to Medina and kind of formed the first like actual Muslim community that wasn't just kind of like being persecuted, but was like actively, you know, running in coalition with other groups. So that kind of, that initial like pilgrimage called the Hijra is often kind of a theme that people draw on for all sorts of things in order to think about like immigration and migration. So
yeah.
The development was going to have 1,500 residents and include the full cycle of home ownership from starter homes to senior condominiums laid out amid trees, lakes, and gardens. There would be daycare and banquet facilities, restaurants and cafes, all anchored by a mosque with a 10-acre footprint. Mr. Yusuf emphasized the development would abide by fair housing laws. It would be Muslim friendly, but not exclusively Muslim, just like a hotel is family friendly or LGBTQ friendly. Much of America was founded on communities built around religious organizations. Mr. Yusuf said that's how neighborhoods were built. I have such mixed feelings about this. I don't know. What do you think? Like even the concept itself, before we even get to the backlash. Like on the one hand, I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like a lot of small town America, for example, does run around the local church. Like that's true. So like, why don't Muslims have a right to that? Yeah. On the other hand, my knee-jerk reaction is to be like, oh, like I would not raise my kid in like on like what sounds like a little bit like a Muslim compound. I don't know. Yeah. Like I really value growing up in diverse environments, and to me, like the experience of being Muslim in the US, as far as like I have experienced it, though I know this is not true everywhere, in places like Dearborn or like Dallas, especially Dearborn, is an experience of being a minority. So it just kind of seems weird to grow up in a little enclave. Yeah. I don't know.
I would say I am just fundamentally opposed to this because it is like private development, right? Like, and it's because I have nothing against like a Muslim community wanting to actually create their own space, right?
With amenities and services that serve them. Yeah.
But because the base of this, it takes place on like the foundation is like private ownership, and that's the way you're building it. Like I just find that that's a little bit weird, and that's kind of what makes this a little bit confusing.
But how else would you do it in this country, to be fair? I mean, it's not like the state is going to be like, here you go, here's a parcel of land for your Muslim community.
No, the state's not like, so I think, you know, they're just acting the way that the system allows them to, and like they're not doing anything that other people are doing wrong, right? Like you have all these like weird Christian communities in Florida. You have one that was created by like the fucking what is it, Domino's CEO, like Ave Maria, Florida or whatever.
Oh,
like people
create I haven't heard of that.
Their own little weird communities all the time. And so like, why not these people? But I also, that's what you open the door up to, right? So it would be,
interesting. I hadn't really thought about this angle.
If you want to keep the current system, right? Like if people are going to advocate for the current system of like private land ownership and development, then you have to allow for something like this. Fine, right? Like, but if you I agree with you. I think there is inherent value to having like a vibrant, diverse community. And I think that happens in places like New York because people
or even
just like
places like Minneapolis.
Or places like Minneapolis, right? Because you just don't have that many people. Like no one can buy a large swath of land in New York and just be like, this is a Christian community.
Right.
Well, except for, I guess, Williamsburg. Somehow they did it within, you know, like slowly buying up buildings.
I mean, a lot of New York. I mean, yeah, also like Coney Island is mostly Muslim. Yeah, really? I mean, there are definitely sections that are like one ethnic group that is also a religious group. Yeah. Yeah.
But the Coney Island Muslims, do they like own that land, or did everyone just kind of migrate there over time?
It's a mix. But I mean, even Williamsburg and the Hasidic community, there are other communities right next to them. You know what I mean? It's not like it's, yeah.
I don't know. I just do think that, you know, I wouldn't want to live in this place.
Yeah. I hadn't really thought about the private ownership angle. That's a good point. Because I mean, it's so easy for me to roll my eyes at like the Disney community that's being developed in North Carolina and see like that's ridiculous. But I guess like, why are there communities in general and not just like well-funded state plan housing? Yeah. But I mean, the other thing is, I guess, like if you are going to do something like this, I mean, no one is using this farm. This man is desperate to sell it. Like if you are going to develop land, at least no one's being moved. You know what I mean? It's like a sod farm that's not working.
Wait, so I kind of, sorry if I missed it, but what was the guy's reaction to...
The guy who was trying to sell was thrilled.
He wanted this.
Oh, yeah. And then it ends up being a city council meeting, as we'll see. And then other people take offense. But the actual guy who was selling his farm was like, great.
He was just like, subhanallah.
No, I mean, he was just like... He was like, yeah, like it's not profitable. It hasn't been profitable for years. Like he wants to retire. Like he was happy to sell it.
Okay.
So that's kind of like another dynamic. Like at least it's land that's not being used,
Right.
I mean, I think he's still currently growing stuff on it, but he's barely breaking even. Like he's tired.
Yeah.
His sons were happy. Like the whole family was happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I worry about, like, again, this is probably me projecting my own experiences, but like, I just also, it depends on who the leaders, like the spiritual leaders are of this community.
No, that's so true. It could very quickly become like a very weird totalitarian environment.
If you were to tell me, somewhere in Cary or, Garner, North Carolina, we're going to build a Muslim community of a bunch of like Raleigh. Yeah. I'd be like,
nah, man. Yeah.
I don't know if that's a great idea. I don't want to I don't want to shit on this too much. But again, like I just don't, part of me doesn't agree with it, just kind of fundamentally. Like I don't think these religious communities should exist, period, because of the whole private ownership gets a little bit weird, and you exclude people, and
they're saying that's why they're saying like basically they're building it to market it to Muslims, but they're not saying they can't say legally, obviously.
Of course they can't. Yeah, they're not
other
ever
people
say
could
that.
live there, but probably they would choose probably not that many people would choose to, because it's like if everyone else is Muslim. But then that also bears the question of like a lot of Minnesotan life where everyone is white, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like, well, why is that okay, Yeah. So then there's this guy who we get introduced to, Luke Walter. So one day in late March, Luke Walter's wife, pregnant with their third child, alerted him to a website for what appeared to be a Muslim-centric development, proposed for land just a short drive from the home the couple bought in 2017. At first, he thought the idea of a religion-specific neighborhood was a prank or even a scam. Is that allowed, he recalled thinking? Mr. Walter, a British immigrant who works in customer service, said the proposal raised the familiar worries about increased traffic, environmental impact, and overdevelopment, especially since another builder had recently floated the idea of an active adult community on land near the Robinson Sod farm. But Mr. Walter summed up his biggest concern in one word: segregation. So this random guy kind of takes it upon himself to become a crusader against this. I will say a lot of this stuff, like worry about traffic. I did a little study like a million years ago when I was in college about mosques built after 9/11 and kind of like the pressures that they faced from their neighbors, whether those were businesses or residential areas. And often it was like this bullshit thing of like, there'll be so much traffic. But meanwhile, like other developments that were built after 9/11 that were not mosques did not face this kind of like backlash, even when they were going to be like highly trafficked businesses. So I feel like that's a little bit of like a random, like sure, environmental impact, overdevelopment, all of these things you could say for any kind of, like, I don't think this one community is uniquely doing this,
Well, I don't know about that. Have you ever seen the parking lot after Joma? That's probably what he's like, I've seen it. I don't. It is specifically these people who will be causing issues with traffic.
No, man, a lot of stuff causes traffic.
Here,
okay,
have you guys seen like how they like people just parking in front of like people, like blocking people into their houses?
I actually think that's really funny. I think it's kind of hilarious.
It is kind of unique to the Muslim community,
I guess, but like people go to Sunday church and park.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. You are kind of right though. That's really funny, but it is particularly unorderly. But and then this thing, Mr. Walter knows that he comes from multi-faith, multi-ethnic family, that his sister-in-law and brother-in-law are Muslim. So he's basically trying to be like, hey, I'm not a racist. I just think this is a bad development idea.
It is funny that he's kind of turning. He's like, actually, this is segregation.
Well, that's the interesting thing. Yeah. He's like this white guy. He's not only a white guy, he's a British white dude.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't know about this.
Something about this feels
wrong.
Like my thing.
Yeah, exactly. Just like he's not like a developer or anything. Yeah. It's just kind of random that he got involved.
Again, I think it's this is kind of maybe a better way for me to put my earlier, like the point that I was trying to make is that the segregation is not coming from the Muslim community. It is fundamentally from the idea that private ownership just exists, and that's how we do property here. Right. Like that's right. If you just have money, if you have the resources, you can buy whatever the fuck you want. And even though you don't have like de jure or like explicit segregation, you can figure out how to segregate your community. And that's always going to happen. It happens now. It happens in downtown Pittsburgh. Yeah. It happens in North Carolina. It happens in New York, everywhere.
And that's the thing, even aside from like these little private developments, you're totally right. Because our whole housing system is kind of based off of like capital and is kind of like exists within a larger social framework. I mean, a lot of American cities are highly segregated. You know what I mean? Yes. Like, I mean, even Minneapolis, which is very diverse, is quite segregated. It's not. It's probably not.
Little suburban communities are like segregated. Yeah. Like, not even like the high class ones. Obviously, the ones that are like high class are like segregated. But even like the lower middle or like lower class
isn't Thomasville fairly segregated? Actually, Thomasville's not that segregated, is it?
It's pretty segregated. Yeah. Like once you get into the little,
there's like a Latino area and like a white area. For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've said this before on the podcast, but like having lived in North Carolina for the last 5 years for me and for Ahmed for a lot of his life, I do feel like, I mean, a lot of the Northeast, look, nowhere is perfect. Obviously, North Carolina got plenty of issues, racial and otherwise, but I do think we find Pittsburgh to be way more segregated than where we lived in Durham, North Carolina.
And I think you have to like make a distinction between what segregation is coming from government policies, what segregation is coming more from the developer and how they envision this community so that they can make it marketable. And then there is some level of self-segregation, right? Like people move to the same area because they want to be around people who are like them. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I do think when segregation is driven by more the desires of like people who are not part of that community, that's when it becomes
I think it's so hard to entangle though. Like I think you listed out those different factors really well, but it's so hard to identify which one is working in any given instance. It's often a combination. I think
this seems to be like the developer and probably also self-segregation, people who want to get out of and I think it's not worth being like, is this right or wrong, right? It is okay and not okay for a lot of different reasons. I think it's worth it is interesting to kind of go into it and be like, how do we actually feel about this?
And then there's also the problem too of like, if you have a community, for example, that has been like historically or in recent times, like majority Black, and then, because of discriminatory housing, that's made housing more affordable. And then people move into that community who are not Black. Yeah. Like that creates problems too. It's hard as an individual to navigate because there are so many systematic issues.
There are, and also there's the issue of like rising, like people who feel like there's rising of Islamophobia. Right. The same way that Soul City was an Afrofuturist project that was trying to envision something different than like the racist structures that we live among today, or like back then and today.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was maybe some form of segregation, even though like Soul City, I think, was envisioned to be multicultural and like multiracial and multi-ethnic and stuff like that. But it was going to be mostly a Black
serving for community. Yeah. And that also gets into, you're right, like the amount of diversity within these categories too. You know what I mean? Like, especially if you're thinking about like a Muslim community, could be very multiracial, and though I don't know how class diverse it would be, honestly, if it's like something you have to buy into.
Exactly. Like I think
probably be pretty middle class.
Of that, plus also the fact that things like this, because land is such a commodity, the people who buy it and the people who like are envisioning, they are playing God, kind of like they're going to be designing a community that other people live in.
It's the American dream, man.
My guess is that there's not really going to be much of a democratic board of the community who will get to decide like, what does our community look like?
It's going to be the people who like founded the community. Yeah,
and it's just going to be in made to their liking.
Which in this case sounds kind of like a middle class South Asian.
Yeah, I think projects like that are kind of doomed to fail, or like you end up running your own little like fiefdom.
It's so funny though, because like, sorry, you go first.
I was gonna say this kind of reminds me of I still need to finish watching. I'm like an episode and a half in, but like that Ren Fair documentary where this guy like built this community that he just like, and it revolves around this one guy's vision of like what the Ren Fair should be, and he's like a king in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. I was gonna say it's funny though, because like we've daydreamed with some of our friends. We've got one close friend who's obsessed with the idea of like one day building a commune. And I can also see romanticism to that. You know what I mean? Like an idea of like, oh yeah, like a way that you live with people where you are more invested in communal life and like some assets are shared. Like I definitely see the appeal of that. Mm-hmm. And I think that in really limited ways with some of the community engagement that we do, we kind of try and like, I mean, nowhere near actually achieving that, but you kind of try and grasp at the straws of like what that could mean to have like a community where people were like, so I mean, I think,
but I guess what commune is not owned by anyone.
Well, it would be collectively owned.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, well, I mean, these people are all putting down payments together. Like they are like fundraising among their community and then buying property. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if I'm being really generous, if it was a flavor that I liked more, like a progressive Muslim, like far left, then I could see myself being like, yeah, that sounds great. But I kind of just like, because of my biases and what I can guess about this community, I'm guessing that's going to be fairly conservative. I'm guessing, you know what I mean? That's going to be very pro-capitalist. But if it was a flavor that I felt more comfortable with, I kind of see the appeal. Yeah. Like if we could live with all of our liberal progressive Muslim friends, I still wouldn't want to be in a suburb, but if we were like in a section of Durham, I would love that.
Yeah.
I mean, we wouldn't, I think the idea is that we wouldn't want to be isolated, though. We'd still be in conversation, because like not all of our friends fall into that category, obviously.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah. Something about that though, I sort of get. So they had the city council meeting. And it starts to get tense again. This Mr. Walter guy is like, you're trying to create a divided city. Yusuf feels uncomfortable, feels like he's kind of coming for him. Mm-hmm. And then the poor sod farmer guy is getting calls from people. And he gets a call from a high school acquaintance who's like, are you selling to the Muslims? And Mr. Robinson recalls, yeah, what's the problem? And his high school friend says, we're not going to let that happen.
Wow.
So there develops this slow to grow movement, which is basically saying that Medina Lakes shouldn't be created because it's going to be a city within a city. And it has different components, right? So there are some people who are saying just like, well, we just don't want there to be a city within a city. But as we'll get to, inevitably, some of the tenor starts to become pretty Islamophobic.
Sure.
And then also it's kind of revealed that this guy who's the developer on the project, Faraz Yusuf, used to be known by the name Faraz Muhammad. He changed his last name because in 2013, he was convicted of theft against his employer. So he was incarcerated for a year for forging. For forging checks amounting to 20,000.
Hell yeah.
But to his credit, he was kind of like, hey, I was 23. I served my time. He says that it was rough, but he kind of like, he entered and has since become like a productive member of society, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then he even says, Mr. Yusuf seemed unfazed when shown the letter, saying he was clearly living rent-free in the opposition's collective head. They can scrub and find some of the negative stuff in my background, but I'm pretty content where I am, he said. I'm sure it's been brought up to you that I live in my parents' basement. Does he? I do, Mr. Yusuf said. He added, it's a phenomenal basement.
Phenomenal.
So this guy's got some, like, I feel like swag. He's just kind of like, fuck you, I've done things wrong, but like, whatever, you know what I mean?
Right.
Which I feel like fair enough. I mean, you're not going to hold someone.
This man is going to be running for president in about like 20 years.
Well, apparently, actually, this guy, Mr. Walter, who's leading the charge, says he has an interest in politics against Mr. Yusuf.
This is going to be like Muslim Trump.
Yeah. So there's a public hearing. It attracts hundreds of people. There are police officers. And then I'll just kind of flash forward to page 10.
Oh, man, I hate to imagine what this Medina Lakes Police Department's going to be like.
Maybe it'll be some like Iranian-style morality police. That'd be awesome.
God,
no, that wouldn't be awesome.
So annoying.
We hate the Iranian morality police. It just is funny. But Jailani Hussain, the CARE executive director. Well, actually, let me take a second to pause here. Minnesota Muslims are like a special brand, kind of the way that British Muslims are a special brand. I think it's because there's a lot of them. I don't want to generalize, but I do think it's fair to say they are particularly militant, I think, in ways that I admire and in ways that I worry about.
Really?
So a way that I admire, for example, is that a lot of the Amazon workers in Minnesota are Somali.
Mm-hmm.
They, I think, were one of the first to unionize, and they just they had that shit on lock. They they control their community. They don't control, but they're very well organized, which I think is awesome and so cool to see.
Yep.
So no one broke that strike line. It was absolutely we are lockstep.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an example of a really cool kind of cohesiveness. There's also been some stuff that I find kind of complicated and a bit conservative and reactionary. Mm-hmm. So, for example, there was a case where cab drivers were not picking up people who were holding duty-free alcohol from the airport mm-hmm. because they said it was against their Islamic morals. And I think that's kind of bullshit. You have to pick up riders, Mm-hmm. There also was a case with which we won't get into too much, but basically at a school, a professor showed an image of the Prophet Muhammad that was historically created by Muslims, and she was fired. And the CARE chapter, so CARE is the Muslim ACLU essentially, but the CARE chapter of Minnesota thought that was the right thing, and they went against the national chapter who said that was not cool.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to what am I trying to say? They're well organized. They have the numbers. And so I'm not surprised that a move like this is happening in Minnesota as opposed to somewhere where there are less Muslims who are less well organized.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, in the same way that it seems really cool, because I don't want to make it seem, I guess I'm talking a lot about Somalis, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm also just generalizing Somalis. I mean, in the same way that I think that Dearborn, which is largely Arab, has a lot of cool organization, but has had some kind of there have been conservative takes against, for example, teaching about LGBTQ people in schools that I'm not a fan of. So anyway, it's complicated. So Jailani Hussain, the chapter's executive director of CARE, this is the CARE, I'm guessing, in Minnesota, says that basically the issue here is that they want you to have a mosque or houses but not both, essentially saying that this is really a discrimination issue. Mr. Youssef provided the city council with dozens of screenshots from various online forums, including Love Lino Lakes. While many comments expressed routine concerns or argued against a separate community, America is a melting pot, so melt. Others smacked of bigotry, including those posted by Lino Lakes residents. So I guess there are some people already in this area. This one person says they don't need to be in a mosque 5 times a day like they claim. I used to work for a nearby county and they stop and kneel in corridors to pray. They're full of malarkey. That's a really funny take.
He's become an anthropologist.
Yeah, he's hey, they'll do it anywhere.
I've observed them.
They don't need 40,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And then someone else says they treat their woman like garbage, so why would any woman back up any Muslim man? We the people will stop you and drive you out of Lino Lakes. I'm a veteran. I will tell you now the people leading this project are wolves in sheep's clothing. Why has no one mentioned 9/11?
I love that quote.
Because they're too afraid.
It's just out of nowhere. Why hasn't anyone mentioned 9/11 yet? I'll tell you why. Because they're too afraid of being labeled as Islamophobic.
You probably don't want me to, this is the same quote, you probably don't want me showing up to any meetings. I am not afraid to say I don't trust anyone or anyone involved in this Muslim-centric ideology in my backyard, period. So, I mean, a lot of it obviously ends up being pretty Islamophobic and kind of messy. I think I skipped over it, but there even at one point is someone who is why have they not mentioned October 7th? Which also, not related to this community, obviously.
Yeah.
And kind of where it ends, we can skip over to page 14, is essentially, here's where he says, CARE's website makes no mention of the October 7th attack on Israel. There is a moratorium that was passed. So essentially, Medina Lakes is not being developed yet. Mm-hmm. Mr. Walters says that he might run for office one day, and Youssef says that he returned all the deposited money, but would continue with his development proposal, and says that we plan to be part of the community and get integrated. So it seems now the strategy is more to move into this area, but they can't formally buy the whole farm that's next to it. And then this poor guy who owns the farm was just on the stifling morning after the vote, the aging farmer stood beside a tractor, resigned to more years of delay. He gazed into a saw green expanse now fringed by housetops and shrugged as if to say there's no way to keep the grass from growing.
Yeah.
So this poor guy doesn't sell his farm.
He's my perfect Muslim paradise. Gone.
Yeah, so that's that. I mean, it got stopped. I mean, the thing again that is interesting, I think you got a good point. Part of me also wants to say this is bullshit. If these had been white people trying to make a fucking Disney compound, it would have happened. And it's kind of messed up that they were discriminated against because they were Muslim. But really, ideally, there would be no compounds. You're right. Like, there shouldn't be Muslim compounds. There shouldn't be Disney compounds.
Yeah.
There should be integrated communities, I guess, with like good social services, you know, ideally. I don't know.
Yeah.
There'll probably always be some level of self-segregation. I don't know.
I just think when you have, again, like you have these communities that are, you know, privately owned and developed, to some extent, they're going to be made in the mold of the owners, like the people who have capital there. But
it's not perfect because these people have capital, but there still is like a race kind of component or racialized component that's preventing them.
Yes. Yeah. I'm saying if it gets built.
Right.
So that's kind of like what worries me about any of these projects, is that they're just like so they are, what's the word? Oh my God, my brain's not working.
Exclusionary?
No, they are that, but
not equitable. It's kind of the same thing.
They're subject to, you know, the whims of like people who may or may not be great actors.
Yeah. Anyway, if these people keep on just moving into the area, they can probably take it over low key anyway. They might not officially be able to plan out the whole community, but they could just keep on opening up little shops and centers, and it could become like, you know, any other Jackson Heights, any other like largely Muslim South Asian community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do feel like more and more of these things are going to pop up because people just don't have faith in like public institutions to be able to provide for them. And
it's like the Cairo suburbs.
Yeah. And I think, you know, a lot of stuff is deteriorating. And so people are kind of like looking to get out of different, you know, cities. And
like, if I'm thinking about like a positive spin on it, like maybe the thing that you can get from this is like, hey, people want intentional community. Yeah. You know what I mean? So like, you know, perhaps this is not the avenue through which we think they should pursue it, but like if there's a way to kind of glom onto that desire for like more intentional living in community, less social isolation, I think that's a good thing that could be fed into or tapped into.
Yeah.
Yeah. R.I.P. Medina Lakes.
R.I.P. I think with the deterioration of the United States, we're just going to get like all these different cities popping up, and it's just going to be municipalities.
Yeah. And arguably, again, like there are even cities within cities. The way people move through cities is so different based on their access to wealth, you know? So we already had that to an extent, like someone's experience of New York who is making, you know, $500,000 versus someone who's making 20,000 is like, it's almost like a different city, you know? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If it gets built, I'll enlist in the Medina Lakes Army. And then we'll go to war with like Austin, Texas.
Oh my God. Yeah. Wait, with what? Like the Muslims there, or with just, why Austin?
I just feel like it's advantageous. You could team up with Dallas and take over.
No, you should go, if you were trying to make like an inter-Midwest struggle, you should go to war with Dearborn.
Dearborn.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be a good path of conquest. You go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then
Minnesota, you take over Dearborn.
Yep. And then you could take over like Devon, like the Dacey Muslim area of Chicago. You should just like, you know.
Yeah. And you work your way down to Dallas.
Yeah. Okay. Really Michigan's, I think, where you got to go.
Yeah. You start there. That's a good way to start building the army.
Yeah.
And then you become kind of like the wall in the middle of the United States.
Uh-huh. So this is like every conservative's nightmare.
Yeah.
That Muslims are secretly plotting.
And we divide and then conquer.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, no comment.
Uh-huh. Okay. Well, that was interesting.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I think that's basically it.
Oh. I forgot with the Egypt thing. I did have a clip.
Okay.
Because we did do a lot.
Uh-huh.
But there was a couple things, like you said, that we didn't get to do.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was go to this, unfortunately, spelled cafe, Beano's. It was a coffee place called Beano's in English, B-E-A, like coffee bean, O's.
Okay.
But then when you write it in Arabic, it looks like Beanus.
Oh,
Beano's cafe,
like penis.
Okay. Like you're saying it. So we didn't get to go there.
Uh-huh.
And actually, since I've been here, my TikTok feed is like a lot of Egyptian businesses.
That makes sense.
And stuff like that just showing up. I saw this one earlier today in a continuation of unfortunately named chains. But hold on. Where's the clip?
في ناس كتير عارفة كوك سكواد بس مش كل الناس اللي موجودة في الساحل عارفينه. كوك سكواد هو أحسن سبوت للفرايد تشيكن حاليا في الساحل وهنشرح لكم بقى.
This has to be intentional.
There's a building in the back in the strip mall and it says Cuck Squad. So it's a fried chicken joint in Egypt called Cuck Squad.
What is that supposed to mean? Like cock as in like rooster?
Like a chicken, like a sound. I think.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Like, I think that's intentionally a innuendo.
I don't think
it's gotta be.
But it's called Cuck Squad, and they keep going through all these sandwiches, and like just visually, it's like they're squeezing like a sandwich, and a bunch of mayonnaise comes out. Yeah.
Oh, that reminds me. In Alexandria,
we did not get to eat at Cock Squad.
We did not. In Alexandria, though, we went to like a pretty fancy mall that had a Plan B store, which I think they meant in the way of like
it was a clothing store.
It's not Plan A, it's Plan B, but I don't think they need the connotations of like the morning after pill. And it was funny because all like women's clothing.
Yeah. Clothing for sluts.
That's not what we think.
Oh, okay. That's not what we think.
No.
Okay. That's what we would think if we lived in Medina Lakes.
That's probably what we would think if we lived in Medina Lakes.
We can open up the Plan B.
We might not even know what Plan B was if we lived in Medina Lakes.
I don't know about that. I think people do.
Muslims are fine with birth control, but yeah. Plan B tends to be a bit of a follow-up option,
That's right. I was thinking.
But actually, that's not true. I mean, I've taken Plan B while with you, so you can use it at any point in your life.
Okay, bye.
Bye.